Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Friday's Lounge. I hope everybody is having a wonderful, wonderful start to your weekend. And I can't wait to get into getting you guys grounded, getting you guys balanced, because you know what? I'll put a little music on, whatever. So I want to get you guys grounded and balanced because I know that the energy is moving very, very quickly right now, very fast. And with that fast-paced energy, we want to get a lot done. We want to take care of, tie up the loose ends, but also we're experiencing so much anxiety because there's so much change going on in the world right now, as we know. And we just come off of a almost 2-year run with the pandemic. So it's like you guys are starting to be like, okay, well, let's move into life a little bit. And then we have everything going on in the Ukraine. And I mean, it's just been it's just been crazy. So we want to bring some peace, some grounding, some balance to your life this weekend, because this week has been really, really fast paced and crazy. Not that say it hasn't been productive. It has been productive. You guys probably got a lot done, but you're probably still in the practicalities. So please put in the comments, how was your week? Did you guys have a tough week? Did you guys have a good week? Was it as fast paced as I'm letting you know that it is? Did you get some stuff done? But I could probably tell you energetically that you guys are probably not in your center this Friday going into the weekend. So we want to calm the body, calm the mind, calm the scatteredness, and move you back into a space of wellness and feeling like the world isn't such a dangerous place, and because it has been, and things that are going on. So just a few announcements before we get started, and then I'm going to introduce our lovely, lovely guest for this evening. Where are my banners here? I think I'm totally scattered myself. So just remember, my monthly energy forecast goes out on the 15th of every month. My monthly energy forecast. You guys know I go over every day of the month. That means if you have in your manifesting time, you want to know what days are best for your key decisions in your love life, your relationships, your career, your health, relocation, real estate, all that stuff. And if you don't take action at the right time, sometimes that window of opportunity isn't as flowing. Sometimes it's like trying to force a door shut or whatever. You want to make sure that you're taking that action, because energy, action, and intention has to pair with timing. So I tune into the whole month, every day of the month, and I give you guys that insight on what days are the best to make those key decisions. Now, in order to do that, you need to go to the link in video for the monthly energy forecast and sign up for our email list. This is an exclusive video forecast that only goes out to my email list. So it's not public. You can't find it on YouTube. You can't find it on Facebook. If you like the weekly energy forecast, you're going to love the monthly energy forecast. So make sure that you put your email in before the 15th of the month, because if you get it in after the 15th, you're not going to get this month's forecast. So make sure you go and do that. Also, we talk about this every week. The intuitive development course is coming out. So if you want to balance that scattered mind, I know a lot of you have asked, what can I do with my intuition to calm my scattered mind? Is that possible? My mind's been racing my whole life. Does this sound like you? If it does, put a yes in the comments. You want to feel grounded. You want to feel centered. You want to feel balanced. Now, if your mind is racing, your intuition's going to be off. Okay, so we want to get the body in tune with that intuitive faculty. It's just not learning the techniques of intuition. It's also learning how to calm the nervous system. And not too many programs out there offer both. So if you want to get on the course waitlist, the waitlist is for the early notification. So we're going to let you know when we're launching, and we have some special bonuses and offers for our pre-launch just for our waitlist members. So get on the waitlist on the link in video. Awesome. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our lovely guest this evening, who is going to help us come out of that anxiety a little bit, come into the body. And she's an author, and she's got a wealth of information. I talked to her before the show tonight, And just the few key points she mentioned, I'm like, yes, we got to get that in. We got to talk about that. So let me just go over Katherine a little bit. I hope that, you know what, I should have asked Katherine how to pronounce her last name backstage, and I'm not going to mess it up. So I'm going to have her introduce herself because I'm sure I'm going to mess this up. But I'm just going to go with Katherine Jansen and then let her tell the rest of the name when she comes on, because I'm going to sound real bad saying it. So she received her master's in public health from the University of Washington in 1992 and spent over a decade in public health managing violence prevention and teen health programs. So a lot of chaotic stuff here that she's been dealing with to bring balance to. But over time, she experienced an inner stirring. What ensued was a process of reflection, curiosity, and ultimately trust as she dove into her current career as a licensed professional counselor. Following in the footsteps of her father, who was also a therapist. That would be interesting. I kind of want to ask her, what's it like to be raised by a therapist parent? Is it like really, really stable and like you sit down on the chair and be like, what do you feel today? Like, tell me about it. Like, or is it like a normal thing? I have to ask about that. She graduated in 2004 from Lewis and Clark College and has now enjoyed over 17 years of private practice, offering not only holistic psychotherapy, but retreats and workshops as well. And I'd love to hear about her retreats. Last year, Katherine published her first book. Yay, Katherine. That's awesome. I know how writing is, and that's a big step. River to Ocean, Living in the Flow of Wakefulness. Her book reflects the human voyage of finding your way to your awakened self. And you know, guys know every week this is what we talk about. As with the river that traverses steep mountains and winding valleys, our inner and outer worlds can be encumbered by a lack of connection to ourselves, old beliefs, an anxious mind, preoccupation with death, even as a medium. I get that. So yeah, that's something we do not talk about a lot, is that when you go to bed at night, are you thinking about death? You know, we don't talk about that because we think if we talk to people about that, that's like crazy. But this is interesting too. Or compromised relationships to others. Each and all of these can interfere with our living and most authentic and loving life. In River to Ocean, Katherine explores 9 aspects of wakefulness. Oh my God, I hope she tells us one little tip, offering insights, practices, and her own and others' inspirational stories from the field. So I just can't wait to get her on. Without further ado, let's welcome Katherine, and please introduce your last name.
Marisa, thank you. That's a fun, unusual, new thing. So it's a Byrkit, as if the Y is a U. The story goes that there were 5 brothers. They all took a different version of Byrkit. I think we got the short end of the stick in my lineage, but whatever it is, it's Jansen-Byrkit. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I was so interested in stuff from your bio, and now I'm like, I have to start asking you questions about that before I forget. So let me just go into it. You were raised by a therapist. You became a therapist. What's it like to have a therapist as a parent? Because we all go to, I've gone to many therapists. I'm like, what would it be like as a kid to have a therapist as a parent? Are they like more stable? Are kids more stable when they have a therapist as a parent?
You know, my dad was stable and unstable, honestly. He suffered with alcoholism, so that ended up being actually his departure from the family at 14 for me when I was 14, which was really pretty devastating and ended up being very much part of my journey. He was a very emotionally available parent. So, you know, those are the parents that give kids a mental health day when that was a very unusual thing to do at the time. So that definitely was there. And then he did his recovery work. In fact, did 29 years of recovery before he passed. So we worked our stuff out. And then when I went to Lewis and Clark, he had not passed. And so just at the end, before I started my clinical practice, we had a little overlap. So he got to be just part of my development as a therapist, talking about what was actually really important in the room. He had so many years himself. And so that was really lovely to share this path with him, this professional. It's really much more than a professional path.
Yeah, that's amazing. The fact that he enjoyed almost 30 years of sobriety is amazing. And so I guess, was he a therapist when he was struggling with his alcoholism as well?
Yeah, he was. And he was
Wow.
one of those really friendly drunks. So we had no idea that
Wow.
was going on. It was only once he left and then the drinking just exploded. And then within 5 years, at 19 years old, here's a man doing the recovery work, the 12-step work really worked for him. So he was making amends to me. And so that really kicked his level of consciousness into another gear. And I'll tell you, at his funeral, when you're in AA for 30 years, basically, it went on and on and on. There, people are really used to standing up and talking and sharing love. And so it was, I think that really, even he worked for the county in Roseburg, Oregon, so he wasn't in private practice. My version of this work is really different than his in that way. But he really thrived in that recovery environment, being a sponsor to many and just being healed and whole than himself.
It's just amazing because, there's a lot of people in our community who are part of the recovery journey. And we work with we talk a lot about recovery. And it's just interesting because it is a spiritual pathway. Those 12 steps it's not about just stopping drinking. It's a pathway to a spiritual awakening, right?
Yes.
So the fact that, he did have the alcoholism maybe was a gift to a lot of other people. And when he went and sought his recovery, sometimes people do change careers, I guess, after they get sober, but it seemed like he remained a therapist for most of his life after that.
Yeah, I mean, he by then was close to retirement. So once he retired, he could just go full throttle into the recovery process. And it was, I have 6 children, so I'm very aware of your question, Marissa. I married a man with 4 children, and then we had 2 additional children, and that was the second career. I've been in this now almost 20 years, and I'm very thoughtful about, I'm mom, I'm not therapist, but just like I'm doing with you right now, I would have the same conversation with a friend, one of my adult children, someone, a colleague like you and I might be in a certain way. It's not like I have therapy talk or I'm not going to say something that I feel cold to offer. That just is the movement of love for me. So I'm not my kid's therapist, but I'm also, you can't kind of take the therapist out of me.
Yeah, it's like with kids, because a lot of people on here are parents and small children. I have a 9-year-old, you know what I mean? So it's like sometimes therapists might have some tools in their toolbox to be able to be like, all right, this is what's really going on with this kid.
That's right.
Everybody's kid, acts out at times, or they're hungry, or they're angry, or they're lonely, or they're tired, all that stuff. But like, a therapist has their little doctor's bag,
They do. It really, and I say this with deep respect for my colleagues in this field, but not everybody brings what somebody needs to the table. So, you kind of cross your fingers and hope they'll do parts work, or they'll do that trauma work, or they'll explain anxiety, or they'll do somatic work, which is about really living in our bodies and working with our nervous system. Well, not all therapists are doing all of those things. So there's no way I'm going to sit with somebody I love and hold back. I draw a lot of things on napkins. I have a great story actually with my daughter-in-law. It's in the book, so she gave me permission to do this, but she and her mom, whom I'd never met because we flew to South Africa to meet this woman to go to our son's wedding. And they were in the stress, mother-daughter stress of the wedding. And I said, I don't want to interfere, but I have a communication tool if you'd be interested in it. And they're like, sure. So we literally sat down in South Africa. The dad flew pigeons. So there's this pigeon sounds around us on a picnic table, on a piece of paper. I didn't have my notes with me. I mean, I was there on kind of, this family event, and just showed them the tool. They used the tool. It got them through their day really differently. So again, I'm not going to sit there and watch people suffer when I might have something, that I need to.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you're bringing up somatic work and trauma work, because I had to figure this out. I talk about my own, I suffer from CPTSD, from, I didn't know that for most of my life. All I knew is that I was in constant fight or flight or shut down, or, not in that connected space, even though I was working as a medium for 25 years and an intuitive. What I noticed was that I was cut out for that because disconnection was, what I did. So disconnecting from my body and connecting to, the other side or other energies was probably the most comfortable for me, but I didn't really realize that I had to tune into the body. So, I mean, I sought out help for my anxiety for over 20 years, and I was really hell bent on getting help, and nothing helped me for like, and I'm like, why am I going to talk, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, did not help me. I'd be explaining to these people, this is going on in my body. Okay. Like I feel like there's a tornado inside my body, but my mind knows I'm okay. I know I'm fine. I know I'm 30 some years old or whatever, but these symptoms will not stop. And nothing I do, from meditation, taking a bath. So I had to actually research myself, because a lot of these therapists were saying, oh, we're trauma informed. And I was like, if you don't know what's going on with me, then something's off with you. You know what I mean? So it took me just being so passionate about finding help that I came across Deb Dana's work of polyvagal theory. Right. And I was like, oh, our nervous system has gears, and I could understand what those gears are. Just like on a car, we have park, we have drive, we have reverse. And I could learn about that and realize, like, if I could spot these things, I can control those gears. And that was so empowering.
Exactly.
So empowering.
I love that you're familiar with her work. So just to build on that, our nervous system is always asking two questions. Am I safe and am I connected? And the really powerful thing about Deb's work is its connection to self, not just other. Self, other, the world, and spirit. And so if we even just think about being connected to others, or if we're understanding what's happening right now, across the world, and so frightened, and we're intrinsically connected to just all of us as beings, right? It is a kind of, how then do I have my nervous system answer that question, that I am connected and I am safe, or in a way safe enough. I don't think that's not simple, and it's not a binary, but safe enough so I can be a little more calm in my body, a little less disassociated, as you talk about. So with trauma, we disassociate from emotions and our body, but not a lot of people talk about disassociating from the body. They talk about emotions as if they don't live in the body, and emotions all live in the body.
Yes.
So pulling that together holistically is so, so important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Deb Dana's work led me to a couple people, and there's not a lot of people on the East Coast who practice this. It led me to find a woman in Romania who, from Instagram, like I had to do so much research and finally found someone who actually wasn't a licensed therapist, who was a trauma-informed coach, who did more for me in 6 months or 3 months, because she had been through. She says, oh, you felt that way? Oh, I felt that way too, and this is what I did. It wasn't like, oh, you might need to go somewhere to get away, or, just accept those feelings or whatever it was. It was like, I could tell her the weirdest thing. She's like, oh yeah, you're dysregulated, or you're going through chronic dysregulation. And it made me feel like I made sense, where for most of my life, I felt different. I felt like no one understood my pain. I felt like I didn't make sense, and nothing made sense, And
that's tough. Right. And for a younger you, or any of us, the frightening thing about when I don't make sense to myself, or I need to make sense to the world to make sense to myself, is the organization of the human self. So our circumstances and our early environments literally condition the formation of that first belief system, the sense of self, the attachment process, the sense of danger or safety. Even epigenetics now are like, how much of the cortisol and anxieties are going in utero. What are we actually looking at there in terms of DNA impact? And so, that's the great wakefulness journey I had to do. This book that I wrote was really my journey, even though it's not a memoir. It was starting on the inside out. How did I rebuild my sense of self? Sounds like, Marisa, you had some of that same journey. And therapists and spiritual teachers helped me, but I had to do a lot of it on my own. And I'm glad for that, actually. Everyone did the best and contributed, but a lot of it was really the hard internal work of claiming my worth again, not just doing an affirmation of I'm good enough. That was my head. I had to live in an embodied way, which was different than me intellectually believing that I was good enough. Right. And so, yeah, I think that journey, it's rare not to actually meet adults that don't have some version of a kind of reclaiming restoration of self. And I think that's a powerful thing. It's part of what makes the journey actually meaningful is the process itself, not just the destination in a way. I mean, a lot of people have pretty tough stuff to get through. It's pretty deep ditch of trauma.
It is. Yeah, it's hard because I had an intuitive development physical school many years ago for like 12 years. And I taught intuition to people, taught them the techniques, intuition. But now it's like, wait a second, we can't address technique without body. We can't address coming, because that's where the clarity comes from. That's where the intuitive strength comes from. That's how we're able to hold the connection. That's how we're able to use self-trust. Because I was like literally in the top 1% of what I did for a living, but my personal life was a mess. And it just kept getting more anxiety, more panic attacks. And yet people would see me on television or on the radio, be like, oh, you look so successful, just fine. I'm like, you have no idea what's going on in the background. I can't even like sit up straight, half the time. So it's like now learning, and I had to be really just like, there has to be a way out. And for my clients, especially when I was just doing the intuitive sessions or the mediumship, I'm like, wait a second, I could predict what's going to happen in detail, but I'm predicting their cycles. I'm predicting their patterns. That doesn't mean that where they're going in their future is going to be like any different from where they are now. So how do I get my clients out of this? Like, how can I give them hope? So I put it out into the universe. I said, do whatever you need to do with me. I'll take it. Put me through it so I can help them. And boy, was I in for being put through it, because this was not easy.
No
work at all. And you're talking about feeling safe or feeling connected. Sometimes I think we're close to being vulnerable, or we're in safe relationships with people. Sometimes that could be when we feel most unsafe, because it seems like we have to go deeper into a vulnerability, or we look at remind us their tone. They might have a slight tone, and all of a sudden those somatic symptoms start. So you're like, oh no, you're not safe. You're not safe. So it's like, how do you differentiate between, because people are like, well, listen to your nervous system, what's not good for you. But sometimes it's not always the case that it's not always good for you.
Well, what I would say, and I appreciate about Deb's work, is our nervous systems are not always right. They're just a very old part of our brain. And if there hasn't been healing, enough resolution, it's asking at this neuroception level, which is underneath perception. It's asking, am I safe? Am I connected? And it's always going to override what that's a really safe person to me. That's my husband. That's not my father, or that's not an abusive boyfriend, or that's not this situation. That's what our mind will say. But the nervous system, if it is unhealed, and as it tracks safety and danger, it's ultimately going to decide where we are. And if we're anywhere but at the top, if you remember her little ladder in this ventricular state, we start slipping into fight or flight. And what I've been really loving is introducing the idea of dorsal state to people, because it's fluid and it's a lot quicker than depression, and it can change. It can, as you know. And so it might feel like depression, but it actually may not be clinical depression. But it's this, but I'm shut down. Like, I don't have energy to work with. I can't even talk sometimes, like that flat feeling. And so to be able, again, to kind of have a name for it and have a sense of empowerment, which her work is really empowering, which all work should be, of course. And like, what can we do within ourselves? What are those incredible capacities that we have? To certainly lean on external sources, for sure, they have their place, but there's so much, as I sense Marisa, that we have within us, our capacities and potential.
Yeah, and for the people that are watching, and you guys, seriously, like, I know sometimes you guys are going off with comments. If you do have a question for Katherine, if she can't answer it right now, she'll answer it after the stream. She'll go into the comments. Please put your comments, in the box if you have some questions about your own life, or questions about what we're talking about, or just want to share your experience. We would love to hear what you have to say. Is it possible for us to give our listeners a little bit of education, like just briefly on the nervous system states, like what is fight or flight? What is dorsal? What is just
Yeah, just really basic.
Yeah, real
This is,
basic.
I love it. And this is where I actually like to draw. I think psychoeducation is a really powerful part. It's not the end game because it's education and awareness. It's not necessarily full inner embodiment and healing, but it's the starting place. So just visualizing a ladder, top of the ladder. This is the vagal nerve that runs, from the back of the skull is my understanding. I'm not a physician, but all the way to the gut. And so it's going to be in a ventral vagal state is when you and I, Marisa, feel deeply connected to each other, ourselves, the world. We feel safe. So I invite people to think about, how would you answer the question, I am, when I'm in that state? I'm relaxed, I'm playful, I'm trusting, I'm loved, I'm loving. And then the second question, and the world is what? Safe, my friend, on my side. Then we start, but if the nervous system says, actually, we're not fully safe. We're not connected to, see, I can be safe, but if I'm not connected to myself or anyone else, I start slipping down that ladder. Mm-hmm. So then we first start going into more of a sympathetic response. And that's when there's a sense of danger, and why we get cortisol and adrenaline is, I need fight or flight. I'm going to need to do something. So there's a lot of energy to work with sympathetic. I probably had a little bit of sympathetic energy coming into this interview, not in a debilitating way, but there are blends of these states, just enough energy to have energy, but not so much I wasn't feeling connected to you or myself or feeling safe. If the threat continues or worsens, then it moves down to what is a collapsed, compromised nervous system kind of state. We're immobilized. It's called dorsal state. And that's where you can faint. I mean, can feel very lightheaded. It's a great sense of disassociation. At that point, the answer to those questions, I am helpless, hopeless, overwhelmed, paralyzed. The world is life-threatening, dangerous, unrealistic, not on my side or out to get me, So I like those questions because in each state we answer those questions differently. And maybe your viewers, your listeners, audience can be thinking about one moment of your life in each of those states. They're called landmark moments, where a ventral vagal state, like as pure as you can remember it, a fight or flight moment, and then a dorsal moment, and then thinking, what did your nervous system need in that moment? If you could turn towards yourself and not be critical of yourself for being in that place, because you're not controlling it, your nervous system is, and just ask your nervous system, it will probably tell you something.
Yeah, and I like what Deb says, like the state precedes the story.
Yeah.
Because I always thought that my story preceded my state. So, thinking, oh, well, this person's doing this, so therefore I'm anxious. But if I were to tell myself the same story when I was feeling in that great connected space, I think the situation would look different, would feel different. I would have different thoughts about that.
That's right.
And it's like she talks about, like, if you're being chased by like a lion, you're not going to be like, oh, he has such a pretty mane, and
it's a good thing. This is it's an adaptive system. And I'll share really quickly because it's been helpful for people to imagine. So when I had my launch party for my book, I was surrounded by people in the room that loved me. I couldn't have been more safe or connected, Marisa. And I started kind of towards the top of the ladder because it's like, I'm so excited and we're going to launch the book. But I don't know what happened quite because I do a lot of public speaking. I started sliding down the ladder, and I don't know dorsal state. That has not been a home away from home for me very often. And I didn't faint, but the nervousness not only didn't go away, it got worse. And I read from my book and I can barely breathe. So if I would have done that little exercise, okay, turn towards yourself and ask yourself or your nervous system what it needs, it probably would have said, leave. Unfortunately, what was actually going on was a harsh inner critic going, Katherine, what are you doing? You can't get this day back. Everyone loves you. There's no problem here. So any people that kind of think about that harsh inner critic, they relate to that will trap you at the bottom of the ladder because I was disconnected from myself.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have, even if I'd taken a break, if I'd continued a stream of consciousness of self-criticism, right, and judgment, I would have trapped myself at the bottom of the ladder in a way, because I wouldn't have been connected to myself. I could have pulled somebody from the party and they would have given me a hug, but I was disconnected from myself. So what I love about our work is it really connects a lot of dots about the body, about relationship to self, and about the nervous system.
Yeah. When I talk about dorsal, for me, when I've experienced it, it just felt like a lot of fatigue and just feeling like I don't have the energy to do everything I need to do. And it's almost like then my brain starts putting pressure on itself. Like, what do you mean? You need to produce, you need to go, you need to do, you need to work, you need to do. And from what I learned from Deb's work, it's like, you got to slowly come out of that state in order to put a little sympathetic energy to be able to get connected, where I would try to go from that state to just forcing myself to get up and go because I was feeling guilty or ashamed that I was like not producing, not doing, not being productive. You know what I mean?
Yes, I totally know what you mean. And what I really love is it's not only empowering because I can now understand something and work with it. It's non-blaming, because the nervous system goes back to she literally probably talks about a home away from home. Mine more is fight or flight. I've always had a temper. I had to really work with that, not dorsal, but it was not my choice. And so I can't actually take responsibility in the same way, in an oversimplified way. And I believe with COVID, if we think about in the world, and everybody's ladders, a whole lot of ladders on this planet, I think the whole collective has shifted. I also think what's going on around the world right now, and it's very real and it's very intense, and we got to really understand how this is existing in our human system. It's so important to do that. When you know this kind of information, you can begin to she talks about a savoring practice where you go to the things, the who, what, when, and wheres that talk to your nervous system and restore your nervous system. Well, if I know I'm doing that restoratively, then I'm not going to feel guilty if I'm going to go cuddle with my dog and not watch more news, for example. I am literally building or fortifying a nervous system that needs to get through these times, right? And that's those kinds of nurturing things that we can do change our state. And so, because a lot of people with all this going on feel really badly if they go for a walk or enjoy, some beautiful flowers or have a connection with a friend. And we really need to have a really wide view of ourselves and others in that way.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to ask you about this quickly. We've been watching a lot of news and getting a lot of information over the past couple of years. It's like, well, if you do this, you're safe. If you wear a mask, you're safe. If you get a vaccine, you're safe. Okay, we're lowering the mask roll. Now you're safe. Oh, wait, you need to put masks back on. Now you're not safe. Okay, now the schools have masks. Okay, the schools are shut down. Now, if you get this amount of vaccines, wait, that's not safe. But we just told you for 6 months it was safe. Now there's a war. It's kind of like, it's no matter, I think if people tell us we're safe right now, I don't think we feel that we are.
Well, I think that's such a good point, Marisa. And how do you go? And it was, my perception and perspective is COVID was especially dangerous in the beginning because we knew very little. We did not have treatment. We did not have vaccination. We did not understand how it worked. And so we told our nervous system, this is very dangerous out here, right? And then as things change, and we learn that through our cognitive process, which is information, our nervous system, who knows what month it's back in. And so, but again, people can give themselves a hard time. Like, it's fine, but I don't feel fine. There's a disconnect there. And so I think when we understand that the nervous system has to kind of catch up, it even has to catch up to kind of in a way seeing whole faces, even though masked faces can to the nervous, the human psyche, be kind of threatening. If I just see your eyes, my system is like, are you with me or are you going to attack me? Like as a mammal, right? But that's what we've been doing. Now we're seeing the whole face. It's much more intimate. It's like, oh, so this is really reconnecting again and kind of dusting off those old neural pathways of this is normal. Everybody's safe. And the world also is probably safer now around this disease, and just giving our nervous system some grace around that.
Yeah, but for me, it's still like the habits that I've been into
Sure,
past 2 years. I'm just like,
sure.
I don't care if everybody's telling me I'm safe. Like maybe I'm not, maybe I am. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Oh wait, is there another thing? It's kind of just like I still don't trust anybody right now. Like I have to completely go by my
Mm-hmm,
intuition and my feelings,
mm-hmm,
and I have to I had to really slow down over the past 2 years,
mm-hmm.
and just like I think a lot of us who are intuitive over the past couple of years, we were use this as a time of self-reflection, and I think a lot of us were able to do a lot of
Yeah,
this inner work because we didn't have a choice. We couldn't push the needle and go go go. We had to stop. And for people like you, people like me, people that are highly sensitive, people that have previous trauma, stopping and being still can bring about those uncomfortable feelings.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So,
This
how
is
like
so refreshing to be talking about. I really appreciate an opportunity to do this because it's,
yeah.
I think we said in our pre-show, it feels remiss not to speak of what's going on, but it is also how to really, I don't even navigate as an odd word for these kinds of times, but navigate or move through it and be well and be whole. It's such that we can also make contributions to this world, this beautiful, crazy, heartbreaking world that we live in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to talk about your book real quick. But before we do that, can you give us one aspect of wakefulness? I know there are 9. Can you share with us one little tidbit of what you talk about, or a little
Um,
takeaway?
well,
You don't have
oh
to.
gosh,
Just
it's so hard to choose. I guess I framed the book in an inner world, outer world, and started with the inner world. And I started with relationship to self. And I see that as we are sourced by source, so much bigger than just a human ego self, but we are also a human self. And that if I had to pick one thing, so much is sourced by that or compromised by a compromised sense of self, spiritually or humanly or both. That's what I would say. But I broke it down in my book to talking about the ego, talking about ideas of identification, talking about intrinsic worth, intrinsic belonging, self love, those kinds of things. So different component parts of that. Yeah. So
awesome. Well, let's talk about your book. Let's get into that. So, your book is called The River to Ocean Living in the Flow of Wakefulness. And you guys should go get a copy. Tell us a little bit about your book and, who it would be best for.
okay. Well, I believe in integration a lot. So I stopped reading other authors because I wanted to really let this come, you know,
Channeled.
channeled through,
Yeah.
right? Though this is not the first conversation anyone would have around intrinsic worth or undoing unworthiness. Someone like Tara Brach, who was so beautiful and endorsed my book, she's been speaking of that and others for a long time. But the what I did was I would have a page at the most, a concept, an idea, but then I would have practices, Marissa, because too often I was reading self-help books and it was like, okay, I know that, but how do I become that?
Mm-hmm.
What actually builds the neural pathways for that? So I felt like I couldn't just be another book on a shelf that gave, my version, and I use a lot of nature metaphors, interesting, but just more information or similar information. So the practice piece was really important. And then I felt like stories from the field were really important that I pulled from myself, family, friends, some of my kids, definitely clients with their permission. I wanted people to realize it really is real. This is possible. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
pie in the sky stuff. It's certainly not a one session situation. In terms of healing, the journey of healing sounds like you had that like surrender and the universe said, okay, let's go. And you had your walk to walk. But that those inspirational stories, like I have a gentleman who will pass soon, and he was willing to write Embracing Death and Dying in that aspect of wakefulness. He was really willing to tell his story in real time. It's just, again, like half a page, if that, these stories about what it is to be wakeful through his death and how, because we can all have our ideas about that, but I'm not terminally ill. So I'm not at that point in the journey. And so I'm so appreciative for each of those 3 parts in each chapter that I have.
Awesome. Well, if you guys would like to go and get a copy of Katherine's book, you can go to Amazon.com and just search up River to Ocean, Living in the Flow of Wakefulness. You can also connect with Katherine on her website, which is harborglowholistic.com. And for the people that are watching the show, you guys, you all know you get little treats when you watch the show with all of our guests. She will give you a 10% discount on the book if you order through her website and get in touch with her through her website. And also we'll give you a signed copy of the book. Did I get that right?
You did. You did very well. Yes.
And you can also connect with Katherine on Facebook at Harbor Glow Publishing as well. And anything else you'd like to say about ways people can connect with you, Katherine?
I think those are great ways. I'd love to hear from your audience and feel their energy and just appreciate the work you're all doing, it sounds like, in the world, bringing light here. And so, yeah, I think those are the main parts. I don't know that I will write another book, but maybe there will be another one coming. This was 10 years. It was like a 7th child. So
yeah, it is. Birth. Yeah, so that's great. So we loved having you on, Katherine. I hope you'll come back again at some point.
Thank you.
And you've just been such a breath of fresh air and so calming. And you know, and you talk about all those nervous system states. Fight or flight is where I exist, and you know, and to actually know that I could feel those ventral moments, I didn't think that those would happen unless I was fully healed. To know that I could experience a little bit every day, that was great.
Well, and that, yeah, I'll leave you with this tidbit because, and this is Deb's work, not mine, but this savoring practice, there's something about 30 seconds that's different than 20 seconds. What I've been telling my clients is you don't have to go do 20 minutes of meditation. You don't have to go engage in something like just your current life. You take a sip of tea in the morning, just savor that without distraction for 30 seconds. That literally moves you up the ladder, even though at that point in the day you might be feeling pretty connected and safe. So yes, it's like that's low-hanging fruit for us, Marisa. And I hope people can look around. Even inanimate objects, if it talks to your nervous system, gaze at it. Gaze at your partner or your child a little bit longer. And yeah, our nervous systems are so thankful for that.
Yeah, things that make you happy. I remember when I first started this, you know, the people who did the polyvagal work would be like, look at something in your room that makes you happy and tell me the story about it. And their nervous system would literally shift from high anxiety, racing mind to smile on their face, connection, and happiness. Like you can shift. It's just holding those states. It takes a little while to practice that, to hold those ventral states, but I didn't know those were even possible because I didn't exist in a ventral state.
I love that.
I didn't. So
wow.
Yeah, so you've got some good stuff going on, and I'd urge everyone to connect. Go to Katherine's Facebook page, get on that, go to Harbor Glow Publishing. Once again, her book, River to Ocean, Living in the Flow of Wakefulness. Get that on Amazon.com. But if I were you, I would go straight to the website because she's going to get you a signed copy and give you a little bit of a discount for being a lounge viewer. So you guys feel free to put your comments in the chat. We will, once the show ends, we will be on the chat. We can answer some of your questions. And we hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend. And remember that energy forecast is coming up next week. So make sure that you are on our email list, and also you are getting on the intuitive development course wait list, because we will go into the nervous system as well in the intuitive development course. So you'll get the best of both worlds. And we would love to have Katherine back on at some point to discuss some of these things. So thank you, Katherine, for being a wonderful, wonderful lounge guest. And we hope you had a great time hanging out with us as well.
I totally did. I'd love to come back. You take good care. Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye, guys. Have fun.